Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Katerina. Thank you, Maria. Dear colleagues, Kalispera, for you at least, because as you said, I'm in Florida in this moment, so it's 12 o'clock a.m. Thank you very much. It is really an honor and great pleasure for me to be here and open, in a sense, this important conference tonight. Although, of course, it saddens me to have to do this remotely, I nonetheless feel like I'm there with you in the headquarters, by the way, of the first Goethe Institute ever opened outside Germany in 1952. This event, as Maria said, is the last piece of a series of seminars which touched upon several aspects of our profession, and in particular of the training required to become court or legal interpreters and translators. I will be happy to talk about the questions and the doubts Maria presented one day. I'm sure we will try at least to find a solution. And let me thank you, Maria, Katerina, and all your CDC colleagues for the enthusiasm and the commitment you have shown around this initiative, which I'm hopeful that all EULITA members will always keep as a reference. Stimulating appropriate training and research that ultimately improves quality is, in fact, one of the specific goals and objectives enshrined in the EULITA Constitution, probably at the core of our association's existence. In the same way as national professional associations have to comply with a certain number of conditions to become members of EULITA, including, for example, that of each showing the existence and application of their own code of ethics, it is our common responsibility as national associations and EULITA to give our future colleagues who are individual members or who will become individual members of those same national associations the concrete possibility to improve their skills, knowledge, and quality to actually achieve that status. University courses are the first and best resource the students have if their intention is to become legal interpreters and translators. But unfortunately, such high-level trainings do not exist everywhere, are often quite expensive, and in general, not all language pairs are taught. And all of us who live in the Mediterranean countries know well that, at least for so far, the issue of languages that are less common is still largely unresolved, as you said, actually. Also, sometimes courses are rather long, more than 3 years, which means that in the meantime, there are unqualified and incompetent individuals appointed by courts and law enforcement bodies who sadly end up jeopardizing justice. Another recommended resource are ad hoc courses, seminars on specific topics, and conferences, all of which allow young interpreters to meet, listen to, experience firsthand seasoned and competent legal interpreters and translators who not only teach techniques and appropriate terminology, but also provide interesting and useful tips and concrete solutions from their own experience. Court and legal interpretation and translation does not only involve the knowledge of languages, primarily our mother tongue, but also requires to show to the judges and lawyers we work for that we master such languages perfectly, the same way they do, that they can trust us because we know what we say and how to say it. One of the big issues we legal interpreters and translators are confronted with is indeed the lack of confidence magistrates and lawyers show in relation to our contributions, which unfortunately sometimes is justified. I would love to witness in the near future that such lack of confidence becomes a thing of the past, thanks to a serious and foundational training for all our future colleagues. Court and legal interpretation and translation also involves a good knowledge of the legal orders and of the legal terminology used in the working languages of each professional. And this takes me to another essential element of training, namely that of cooperation among the judicial professionals who work every day side by side, but often are not aware of what the other one's role is, what their ethical requirements are, their duties and rights when performing their respective profession. A partial common training between judges and legal interpreters and translators, prosecutors and legal interpreters and translators, lawyers and legal interpreters and translators would certainly raise awareness in each other's practices and facilitate cooperation when working in court. And so it's highly welcomed. One of my ambitions before the end of my mandate as president of EULITA is to be able to convince the justice administrations in our countries of the great advantages that such cooperation would bring to the whole system. By the way, common training of this kind is at present at the core of some important discussions at European level, and in particular within an expert group I'm a member of, organized by the Directorate General Justice, whose task is to elaborate a training strategy for all the judicial professions and to coordinate such training among them. So judges, prosecutors, lawyers, legal interpreters and translators, but also notaries, bailiffs, and so on, could learn from each other, exchange good practices, improve in the end the conduct of the procedures. This group is now discussing on how better use the European Commission's leverage to boost training in the EU countries and in the Western Balkans among the professions and on the topics that lag behind. This is an excellent news that derives from the communitarization of the area of freedom, security, and justice under Article 81(2)(h) and 82(1)(c) of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, according to which the European Parliament and the Council, and I quote, shall adopt under the ordinary legislative procedure measures aimed at ensuring support for the training of the judiciary and judicial staff, unquote. This means that since the enactment of the Treaty of Lisbon, the training of judicial and legal operations or operators, including legal interpreters and translators, is not an exclusive competence of the member states, but has to be addressed in cooperation with the European institutions. Article 4(3) of the Treaty on the European Union is very clear on this point, and it is important to always keep it in mind in our context. Article 4(3) is the article that talks about the principle of sincere cooperation among member states and the European institutions. We know that all national associations which form EULITA have been struggling for years and still are in order to be recognized as professionals, to be respected and accepted as key pieces in a court procedure that involves a foreign accused or also a foreign witness. Directive 64 has been indicating since 2010 the right road that governments should now concretely implement, because all member states transposed the directive, but not all of them gave execution to it. I really hope that initiatives like yours, dear Maria, dear colleagues, will constitute not only a good example for other associations, but also an important step forward to be better understood and appreciated by all other judicial professionals present here tonight too. Now, before closing my speech, let me please briefly add some words about two very recent judgments pronounced. The first one by an Irish Court of Appeal on November 18, and the second by the Court of Justice on the 23rd of November. These two judgments give us hope. The Irish court found that due to the insufficient quality of the interpretation, and I quote, the witnesses' evidence had been materially misrepresented and distorted, that the fairness of the proceedings had not been safeguarded, and that the appellant's trial was unfair, unquote. It therefore concluded that a procedure had to be stopped there without determining, at least for the time being, the substance of the case. On its part, the Court of Justice, requested by a Hungarian judge to interpret the two articles Maria spoke about, Article 5 and Article 2.5 of the directive, ruled that member states have to take concrete measures in order to ensure that the quality of the interpretation and translations provided is sufficient to enable the suspect or accused person to understand the accusation against him or her, and in order that that interpretation can be reviewed by the national courts. This therefore means that member states have to adopt measures that concretely allow judges to act in case the interpretation performed during one of their hearings is not sufficient to safeguard the fairness of the proceedings. And we have to raise awareness among these judges. This is the first time that the Court of Justice, that, let me remind you, the highest court in the European Union, takes such a clear position on Directive 2010-64, and in particular on one of the fundamental questions for us, that of quality. The conclusion the court arrives at is quite important for us as legal interpreters and translators all over Europe, since its decision in a preliminary rulings procedure has to be applied in all member states. This means that not only the Hungarian judge who made the request for interpretation, but all judges in all member states who have to apply that rule of that directive in a procedure pending before them will have to abide by the court's decision and, if necessary, suspend their procedure, replace the interpreter, anything else the national legislator will concretely decide that has to be done. Let me say that these are two historical decisions that can only give us more strength, more energy, more passion, and not to mention a legal basis in our struggle to raise awareness amongst judges, prosecutors, lawyers, and all other judicial operators. As legal interpreters and translators and professional associations, also as conference interpreters, that I am actually, we have the ethical duty to disseminate these judgments as much as possible among our national administrations, ministries, courts, lawyers, so that our professions can finally start being given the relevance they deserve in the interest of justice. Thank you very much for your attention and have a good continued conference.